The rain began at 6 in the morning, drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 52nd floor like 1,000 impatient fingers. James Morrison stood alone in his office, a tumbler of whiskey untouched on the mahogany desk behind him, watching the city of Portland wake beneath a gray veil. 40 years. 40 years since another rain had taught him what it meant to be invisible. He pressed his palm against the cold glass, feeling the vibration of wealth and power humming through steel and stone, and wondered when he had stopped seeing the people who built it all. The email glowed on his phone screen. Complaint number 47 in 3 months. Same branch, same patterns, same excuses from management. He scrolled through the list, each entry a small wound in the mission statement he had written 2 decades ago, when Sterling Trust Bank was nothing but a dream and a loan he could barely afford. Banking for everyone. The words mocked him now from the lobby walls of 32 branches across Oregon and Washington, printed in chrome letters that cost more than his mother had earned in her entire life. His mother, Rose Morrison, dead at 53, her hands still rough from industrial cleaning solutions, her pride shattered by a bank teller who had looked at her like dirt on an expensive carpet. James could still see the rain that day, could still hear the tremor in her voice when she climbed into their rusted Civic, her face wet with more than weather. She had never stepped into a bank again. 3 years later, pancreatic cancer took her before she could see him graduate business school, before she could know that her humiliation had forged something unbreakable in her son. The phone buzzed. Thomas Bradford, CEO, the only man in the building who still called him Jim instead of Mr. Morrison or Sir. The voice came rough with early morning coffee. You read the reports? James turned from the window. All 47. Victoria Ashford's metrics are untouchable. 200% of target, $8 million in profit from that branch alone last year. While driving away anyone who doesn't look like her client list. A pause. Thomas knew that tone. 20 years of partnership had taught him when to push and when to listen. What are you thinking, Jim? James picked up the whiskey, let the amber liquid catch the gray light. My mother went to First National in 1984 to withdraw $200, her entire month's wages. They told her the account would be closed for insufficient minimum balance. The teller, I remember her face, Tom. She told my mother to find a bank more suited to her needs. Jesus. Mom cried all the way home. I was 12. I decided that day I would build a different kind of bank. And you did. Did I? James set the glass down without drinking. Or did I just build a prettier version of the same thing? Thomas exhaled slowly. What do you want to do? I want to see it for myself, not through reports, not through surveys. I want to walk into that branch the way my mother walked into First National. The silence stretched. Then Thomas laughed, short and sharp. You're serious. Completely. Jim, you're the chairman. You own 65% of this company. You can't just... I can do exactly that. James moved to his desk, pulling up the calendar on his laptop. Monday morning, 9:30. I'll be a customer. Marcus Hayes, recently unemployed, single father, checking account balance of $127. This is insane. It's necessary. James closed the laptop. Set it up. I need Diana to create the account history, make it look real. 4 years old, regular deposits, regular withdrawals, always hovering near zero. A few overdrafts, nothing criminal, just desperate. And if they recognize you, they won't. Nobody looks at poor people long enough to see their faces. The truth of it settled between them like sediment. Thomas cleared his throat. You'll need a child. You said single father. I'll ask Sarah. Isabella's 3.5 now. She'll think it's a game. Your sister won't like this. Sarah knows what happened to Mom. She'll understand. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, I'll have Diana handle the paperwork. But Jim, if this blows up, if the board finds out, let me worry about the board. James picked up the whiskey again, finally taking a sip. It burned clean and expensive down his throat. I spent 40 years building this company on a promise to my mother. It's time I find out if I kept it. The call ended. James stood in the silence of his empire, surrounded by art he barely noticed and furniture chosen by decorators he had never met, and felt the weight of what he was about to do settle into his bones, testing his own creation, becoming the ghost his mother had been. The rain continued its percussion against the glass, and somewhere 40 stories below, the people who made his wealth possible rushed through puddles to punch clocks and serve coffee and clean the offices where decisions about their lives were made by men in suits who had forgotten what rain on worn shoes felt like. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph. Rose Morrison at 25, holding infant James on the steps of a duplex in southeast Portland. She was smiling, her dress simple but clean, her eyes bright with the kind of hope that poverty slowly erodes. James traced the edge of the photo with his thumb, the paper soft from years of handling. The decision crystallized. Monday, he would walk into Sterling Trust Bank downtown Portland as Marcus Hayes, and he would learn the truth about the institution built in his mother's name. Saturday morning arrived with pale sunlight struggling through clouds. James drove his personal car, not the Mercedes, but the 10-year-old Honda he kept for anonymity, to his sister's house in Selwood. Sarah opened the door with Isabella balanced on her hip, flour dusting her hands and a question already forming in her eyes. "You have that look," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. "The one that means you're about to do something either brilliant or catastrophic. Can it be both?" Isabella reached for him, and James took his niece, feeling the solid weight of her. She smelled like maple syrup and crayons. "Uncle Jim, we're making pancakes." "I can see that." He brushed flour from her nose, earning a giggle. Sarah closed the door and crossed her arms, waiting. She had inherited their mother's directness along with her dark eyes. James set Isabella down gently. "Go finish helping Mommy. I need to talk to her for a minute." The 3-year-old scampered back to the kitchen, already chattering about chocolate chips. Sarah led James to the living room, photos of her late husband still arranged on the mantel despite 3 years of widowhood. She had been a nurse before David died, before suddenly becoming a single mother had reshaped every priority. "I need to borrow Isabella," James spoke before Sarah could build her interrogation. "Monday morning, 3 hours, maybe 4. "For what?" "Research." "Jim." He met her eyes, saw his mother looking back at him through genetics and grief. "I'm going undercover, to one of our branches. I need to see how they treat customers who walk in looking like I did when we were kids." Sarah's expression shifted through surprise into something harder. Understanding. She remembered too. She had been 7 that day their mother came home in tears, old enough to know something had broken, too young to fix it. "You're serious?" "The branch has 47 complaints about discrimination in 3 months, all buried under profit margins and performance metrics. I need to see it myself." "And you need Isabella because?" "Single fathers are vulnerable, exhausted, easy to dismiss. If I walk in alone, I might just be poor. With a child, I'm a problem they want gone quickly." Sarah moved to the window, looking out at her small yard where Isabella's bike lay on its side next to a sandbox David had built the summer before his heart attack. When she turned back, her jaw was set in the way that meant she had made a decision and God himself couldn't change it. "You'll keep her safe." "Of course." "And this actually helps people? This isn't just you working through Mom?" James considered lying, offering easy assurances. Sarah deserved better. "It's both, but yes, it helps. If I can document what's really happening, I can fix it. Fire the people who've forgotten why we exist. Promote the ones who haven't. Mom would have thoughts about you lying to people. Mom would understand why." Sarah nodded slowly. "Isabella will need to look the part. I have clothes from the donation bag. And Jim, she can't know it's pretend. She's 3. She'll give it away. I'll tell her we're playing a game, that I'm Marcus today, not Uncle Jim. She'll love that. She's been very into make-believe lately." Sarah managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What time Monday?" "I'll pick her up at 8:30. They stood in the comfortable silence of shared history, 2 people who had learned early that the world divided itself between those who had and those who did not, and that the line between them was thinner than anyone with money wanted to admit. Isabella's voice rang from the kitchen, announcing that the pancakes were ready. James stayed for breakfast, letting his niece chatter about preschool and her imaginary friend and the cat she wanted but couldn't have because of Sarah's allergies. Normal life, simple concerns, the kind of ease that money could buy, but poverty made impossible. When he left, Sarah walked him to his car. "Jim, when you figure out who's hurting people at that branch, make them pay." He nodded, pulling out into traffic, already thinking about Monday, already becoming someone else. Sunday passed in preparation. Diana Park, his assistant of 15 years, arrived at his penthouse with the efficiency that made her irreplaceable. She spread documents across his dining table like a general planning invasion. "Marcus Allen Hayes." She pushed the driver's license across polished wood. Age 34. Address in Lens. No criminal record. Account opened 4 years ago with initial deposit of $300 from a check. Employment at Powell Freight Systems. Regular deposits ranging from $800 to $1,500 monthly. Regular withdrawals keeping the balance near zero. 3 overdrafts, all paid. Last employment deposit 6 weeks ago. Since then, 2 withdrawals of $40 each. Current balance, $127.43. James studied the license. The photo was his, taken last year at the DMV when he had renewed his real license. But he looked different enough with 3 days of stubble and exhaustion around his eyes that it would pass. They had used the real photo on purpose. If anyone ran the license through the system, it had to match. Diana continued, pulling out more papers. Debit card issued to the account. I've had it flagged in our system for manual verification. That's your trigger. When you try to use it Monday, it'll show a fraud alert. Protocol requires escalation to management. She smiled without warmth. That's when you'll meet Victoria Ashford. And the clothes? Diana lifted a Walmart bag from the floor, setting it on the table with distaste. Everything inside was wrong. Not quite fitted, not quite clean. The kind of garments that scream thrift store in desperation. A flannel shirt with a small stain near the collar. Jeans frayed at the hems. Canvas shoes that had seen too many miles. A backpack with a broken zipper, patched with duct tape. I felt dirty buying these, Diana admitted, but they're perfect. James ran his fingers over the flannel, feeling the roughness of repeated washings. You did well. Sir, if I may ask, what happens if this works? If you find what you're looking for? Then I fire everyone who's forgotten why we exist, and I promote the ones who haven't. And if the board objects? James looked at his assistant, this woman who had followed him from startup to empire, who knew where bodies were buried because she had helped dig the graves. The board serves at my pleasure, Diana, not the other way around. She nodded, accepting the steel beneath the words. I'll be monitoring remotely. If anything goes wrong, if you need extraction, I won't. He picked up the license again, memorizing the details. Marcus Allen Hayes, born in Medford, high school diploma. Freight coordinator until 6 weeks ago when Powell Freight Systems downsized. Single father, though the documents didn't specify how or when Isabella's mother had exited the picture. Some stories were easier left blank. Diana gathered the papers back into a folder, leaving only the license, debit card, and bag of clothes. Sir, be careful. People are dangerous when they're exposed. After she left, James stood in his penthouse, surrounded by the accumulated trophies of success, and methodically became Marcus Hayes. He stopped shaving. He wore the clothes around his apartment, breaking in the wrongness until it felt like skin. He practiced letting his shoulders slump, his gaze drop, the subtle body language of defeat that money trained out of people. He logged into the Marcus Hayes account on his phone, scrolling through the transaction history Diana had created, learning the rhythms of a life lived paycheck to paycheck, always one emergency from collapse. The city glittered below his windows, indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere in that sprawl of light and steel, Victoria Ashford was preparing for Monday, unaware that her reckoning had scheduled an appointment. Monday morning broke gray and damp, the weekend's rain having settled into persistent mist. James woke at 5, his body trained by decades of early meetings, and put on Marcus Hayes like armor. The flannel shirt hung wrong on his frame, used to tailored wool. The jeans sagged at his hips. He looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, someone tired, worn, hovering at the edge of giving up. Perfect. He drove the Honda to Sarah's house, arriving at 8:30 precisely. His sister answered the door with Isabella already dressed in clothes that had seen too many wash cycles, her hair pulled into a ponytail that was slightly crooked, the way it might look when a father without practice did his daughter's hair. She thinks you're playing make-believe, Sarah whispered, handing over a small backpack with Isabella's things. Snacks, change of clothes, her favorite book. Try to have her back by noon. She has a doctor's appointment at 2. James knelt in front of his niece, meeting her bright eyes. Hey, Bella, ready for our adventure? We're going to the bank, Isabella bounced on her toes. And you're Marcus today, not Uncle Jim. That's right. And you have to call me Daddy, okay? Just for today, it's part of the game. Okay, Daddy Marcus, she dissolved into giggles. Sarah met his eyes over Isabella's head, and James saw the trust there. Trust he would keep her daughter safe. Trust he would bring her back. Trust that what he was doing mattered enough to justify using a child as camouflage. He nodded once, solemn promise, and lifted Isabella onto his hip. The drive to downtown Portland took 40 minutes, traffic thick with Monday morning commuters. James let Isabella chatter, her voice a bright soundtrack to his preparation. She talked about preschool, about her friend Marcus, a coincidence that made the name easier, about the cat she still desperately wanted. Normal child concerns, blissfully unaware of the performance they were about to give. He parked 3 blocks from Sterling Trust Bank, feeding the meter with quarters from a cup holder full of change. Marcus Hayes would not park in the underground garage. Marcus Hayes walked, carried his daughter because she was tired, arrived already exhausted from navigating a world designed to wear him down. The bank rose before them, all glass and steel and architectural ambition. James had approved the design himself 8 years ago, insisting on transparency, on the message that banking should have no barriers. Now, looking at it through Marcus Hayes' eyes, he saw only intimidation. The building dared you to enter. The building made you question whether you belonged. Isabella was getting heavy on his hip, her head resting against his shoulder in a way that made her seem younger, more vulnerable. Good. Let them see a father struggling with a tired child. Let them see exactly what they thought they saw. James pushed through the revolving door at 9:28, stepping into the cool cathedral of wealth. The lobby stretched upward, marble and light, a chandelier that cost more than Marcus Hayes would earn in 3 years catching the gray morning and transforming it to something expensive. 5 customers already waited, their clothes speaking fluent affluence, tailored suits, designer handbags, watches that told time and status simultaneously. A security guard by the door glanced at James, his gaze traveling from worn shoes to thrift store flannel to the sleeping child, and James felt the weight of that assessment. Threat or nuisance? Worth attention or easy to ignore? The guard's hand drifted toward his radio, then away. Nuisance, then, poor but harmless. James joined the queue, feeling eyes on his back. A woman in Chanel shifted away slightly, creating distance. A man in a gray suit checked his phone rather than make accidental eye contact. The small social choreography of class playing out in glances in space, everyone maintaining the fiction that they did not notice the man who did not belong. 4 teller windows stretched across the back wall. James counted the staff, 2 young women, 1 young man, all dressed in bank-approved professional attire that managed to look both uniform and individual. At window 3, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun helped an elderly customer, her body language patient, her voice, though James could not hear the words, maintaining a cadence of careful attention. Window 1 became available. The teller, name tag reading Brian, called out with practiced brightness, "Next, please." An older woman ahead of James moved forward, her purse clutched close, her movements careful. Mrs. Henderson, if James had to guess, 75, maybe older, her clothing clean but dated, her hair done at home rather than at a salon. She approached Brian with the caution of someone used to disappointment. James was close enough to hear now. Mrs. Henderson's voice trembled slightly as she asked about interest rates on savings accounts, about what programs the bank offered for seniors, about whether $3,000 was enough to open an account that would pay her anything meaningful. Brian's responses came clipped and mechanical. "You need $10,000 minimum for our premier savings. Standard savings is 0.01% annually. Next account, please." Mrs. Henderson stood there a moment longer, processing numbers that meant her money would earn pennies while inflation ate away at its value. "But I thought the advertisement said the premier rate is for balances over 10,000. Brian's tone had shifted from neutral to dismissive. "Is there anything else?" The elderly woman shook her head, gathering her purse, her shoulders curving inward with the familiar shape of shame. She walked past James without seeing him, 2 invisible people passing in a temple built for others. Brian called out again, "Next!" James approached the counter, adjusting Isabella on his hip. She was truly asleep now, dead weight against his shoulder, her breath warm on his neck. He set his backpack on the counter, digging for his wallet with his free hand, aware of his own rumpled appearance, the slight tremor he let enter his fingers as he pulled out the debit card. "I need to check why my card was declined." The words came out tired, defeated. Marcus Hayes' voice, not James Morrison's. "I tried to buy groceries yesterday and it wouldn't work." Brian took the card without looking at James's face. swiping it through his terminal. The screen lit up, information scrolling. His expression shifted, barely perceptible, but James had spent 40 years reading faces in boardrooms and negotiations. Annoyance, a problem customer, a waste of time. The card's been flagged for suspicious activity. I need to escalate this to management. But I didn't do anything suspicious. I just tried to buy milk and bread. Sir, I don't make the rules. You'll need to speak with someone from account services. Brian was already reaching for his phone, punching in an extension. Please step aside. Next customer. I need my card to work. My daughter needs to eat. Brian's eyes finally landed on Isabella, asleep and oblivious, then flicked away as if the sight of her made the situation more uncomfortable. Someone will be with you shortly. Please wait in the seating area. James moved away from the counter, feeling the eyes of other customers following him. The kind of attention poverty attracts, a mixture of pity and fear and judgment. He sat on a leather chair that cost more than Marcus Hayes' monthly rent, settling Isabella more comfortably against his chest, and waited. 10 minutes passed. The lobby cycled through customers, their transactions smooth and quick, the machinery of banking operating exactly as designed for people with money. A man deposited a check for $50,000 without ceremony. A woman discussed her investment portfolio with a personal banker who appeared at her elbow like a summoned servant. The economy of respect playing out in real time. At 9:45, a woman emerged from a hallway marked private banking. James recognized her immediately from the file Diana had compiled. Victoria Ashford, 36 years old, senior account manager, 5 years with Sterling Trust Bank. Performance reviews pristine. Profit margins extraordinary. Client satisfaction among high net worth accounts at 98%. Zero complaints ever filed by wealthy customers. 15 complaints filed by low-income customers in the past 6 months alone. All dismissed as misunderstandings or cultural differences, or the inevitable friction of serving difficult clients. Victoria wore her authority like her Armani blazer, perfectly fitted, clearly expensive, impossible to ignore. Her heels clicked against marble with the sound of competence and control. She scanned the lobby until her eyes found James, and in that moment, he saw the calculation happen. Shabby clothes, sleeping child, body language of defeat. She had categorized him before she took 3 steps in his direction. Her face arranged itself into professional courtesy, but her eyes remained cool, assessing. This was a problem to be managed efficiently, then dismissed. When she spoke, her voice carried that particular kind of politeness that was actually dismissal disguised as manners. Mr. Hayes, I'm Victoria Ashford, Senior Account Manager. I understand you're having issues with your card. James stood, careful with Isabella, letting exhaustion show in his movements. Yes, ma'am. It was declined yesterday and I don't know why. I need to buy groceries. May I see your identification? He fumbled for his wallet again, the movement awkward with one hand, and passed over Marcus Hayes' driver's license. Victoria studied it with the thoroughness of suspicion, comparing the photo to his face, checking the address, the date of birth, looking for discrepancies, for reasons to deny, for the small mistakes that would justify sending him away. Your account shows a balance of $127. I know, but that should be enough for groceries. Mr. Hayes, are you aware that Sterling Trust Bank requires a minimum balance of $500 for standard checking accounts? The lie came smooth and practiced, so natural that James felt anger kindle in his chest even as Marcus Hayes would feel shame. There was no such requirement. He had eliminated minimum balance requirements 3 years ago specifically to serve low-income customers. But Victoria delivered the fiction with absolute confidence, daring him to challenge her authority. I've had this account for 4 years. Nobody told me about a minimum. Policies change, Mr. Hayes. Victoria's smile was a carefully constructed thing, as artificial as the flowers on the reception desk. And frankly, with your current financial situation, her gaze traveled to Isabella, still asleep on his shoulder, and something in her expression hardened. Perhaps you should be focusing your resources on childcare rather than maintaining a bank account that clearly doesn't meet your needs. The words landed like stones. James felt them impact through Marcus Hayes' skin, felt the intention behind them. You don't belong here. You're wasting our time. Take your poverty somewhere else. This was what his mother had felt 40 years ago. This was what 47 people had tried to report through official channels, their complaints swallowed by a system that valued profit over principle. Isabella stirred against his shoulder, making a small sound of discomfort. The movement gave James an excuse to adjust his grip, to let his face show the exhaustion he was performing, the desperate quality of a man running on empty, trying to navigate bureaucracy with a child in his arms. I just need my card unlocked. Please, I have $40 left, and I need to buy food for my daughter. The card is flagged for potential fraud, Mr. Hayes. That's a security measure. It will take 3 to 5 business days to verify and reinstate. 3 to 5 days? I can't wait that long. Victoria's expression shifted into something that might have been pity, but looked more like disdain. Perhaps you should have maintained a larger buffer in your account. Financial planning is important, especially for single parents. The judgment in those words, the casual cruelty disguised as advice, pushed James to the edge of his performance. He felt Marcus Hayes slipping, felt James Morrison threatening to surface with all his authority and anger. He swallowed it down, forced his voice to stay low, pleading, "Is there anyone else I can speak to? A supervisor or—" "I am the supervisor for this branch, Mr. Hayes." Victoria's tone had lost even the pretense of courtesy. "And I've explained the situation clearly. If you cannot maintain the account standards, I suggest you consider alternative banking options better suited to your circumstances." Isabella woke fully then, her small voice cutting through the tension with perfect timing. "Daddy, I'm hungry." The word daddy from his niece's lips, the authenticity of a child's need cutting through all pretense, shifted something in the lobby. James felt other customers' attention sharpen, felt their discomfort at witnessing poverty made visible through a tired man and his hungry daughter. Victoria's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with irritation that her efficient dismissal was being complicated by actual human need. "Mr. Hayes, this is a bank, not a daycare. If you cannot control your child—" "She's 3 years old and she's hungry." James let some steel enter his voice, just enough to show he was not completely defeated. "And all I'm asking is for access to my own money to feed her." "Your money is not in question, Mr. Hayes. Your account management is." "My account management?" The words came out sharper than Marcus Hayes would allow, and James reined himself back with visible effort. "I'm sorry, I'm tired, and I've been trying to find work, and I need my card to function." "Then you should have maintained better financial discipline." The cruelty of it, the absolute lack of empathy, crystallized everything James had feared about his own company. He had built Sterling Trust Bank on the promise of different treatment, on the conviction that banking should serve everyone. And here was his senior management, his profit leader, treating a customer, treating him with the same disdain his mother had endured 4 decades prior. Nothing had changed. He had built a prettier prison with the same locked doors. Isabella was squirming now, uncomfortable and confused, picking up on the adult tension without understanding its source. James soothed her automatically, stroking her back, whispering that everything was okay even though it clearly was not. And in his peripheral vision, he saw something that changed the entire equation. Another teller had noticed the confrontation. The woman at window 3 with dark hair and careful attention, the one who had been helping the elderly customer with such patience. She was watching now, her expression troubled, her body language suggesting she wanted to intervene, but was calculating the cost. Victoria followed James's gaze, saw where his attention had shifted, and her expression hardened further. "Mr. Hayes, I've given you my answer. Unless you have other business, I need to ask you to leave so I can attend to our valued customers." The phrase valued customers, with its implicit exclusion, the suggestion that he and Isabella were valueless, unworthy of the marble floors and careful lighting. James felt something break inside Marcus Hayes's constructed dignity. He nodded slowly, defeated, and began to turn away. "Excuse me, Ms. Ashford." The voice came from the teller at window 3, clear and firm, despite the obvious nervousness behind it. "I can help Mr. Hayes with his card issue. It should only take a few minutes to verify the account manually." Victoria turned with a visible annoyance. "Elena, this isn't your concern. Return to your station. I've finished with my current customers, and Mr. Hayes has been waiting for 20 minutes. I can resolve a fraud flag in under 5 minutes if it's just a system error." The woman, Elena, met Victoria's sharp gaze without flinching. Though James could see the tension in her shoulders, the awareness that she was challenging her superior in a very public space. She was younger than Victoria, mid-30s perhaps, her features suggesting Asian heritage, her uniform worn with the kind of care that spoke to respect for her work, if not the paycheck it provided. Victoria's lips compressed into a thin line. Very well, but Elena, we'll be discussing appropriate protocol after you finish. The threat in those words landed clear and unmistakable. You'll pay for this. Remember your place. But Victoria was already turning away, her heels clicking back toward private banking, dismissing them all with her departure. Elena gestured toward her station, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes warm. Please, Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry for the wait. Let's see what we can do about your card. James moved toward window 3, feeling the weight of the lobby's attention shift and dissipate as the confrontation ended without spectacle. Just another day at the bank. Just another poor person managed and dismissed. Nothing to see. The other customers returned to their transactions, their investments, their comfortable worlds where cards never declined and managers smiled. He reached Elena's station and set Isabella down carefully in the chair beside him, the little girl finally fully awake and looking around with curious eyes. Elena smiled at her before turning her attention to James, and the smile was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way Victoria's calculated courtesy never had. Let me see your card and ID again, please. James handed them over, watching Elena's fingers move across her keyboard with practiced efficiency. She studied the screen, her expression thoughtful, and he saw the moment she identified the problem. A simple flag in the system requiring verification, exactly as Diana had programmed it. 5 minutes of work, if that. Nothing requiring management escalation. Nothing justifying Victoria's dismissal. Elena looked up from her screen, meeting James's eyes directly. Mr. Hayes, I see the issue. There was a transaction flagged as unusual. You withdrew money from an ATM in Oregon City, which is outside your normal pattern. The system automatically locked your card as a security precaution. I had a job interview there last week. That makes sense. Elena typed something. I can verify that this is your legitimate activity and unlock the card right now. Can you confirm that the $40 withdrawal was yours? Yes, gas money to get to the interview. Perfect. More typing, her movements sure and unhurried despite the implicit threat Victoria had left hanging in the air. All set, your card is active again. You should be able to use it immediately. The entire process had taken 3 minutes. James stared at the card Elena slid back across the counter. This small piece of plastic that represented the difference between feeding his daughter and going hungry, and felt the full weight of what he had just witnessed. Victoria could have done this. The solution was simple, quick, requiring only the basic dignity of treating him like an actual customer rather than an inconvenience. But she had chosen differently. She had chosen cruelty. Thank you. The words came out rougher than James intended, genuine gratitude breaking through Marcus Hayes's constructed weariness. I really thank you. Elena reached under her counter and pulled out a small packet of cookies, the kind banks use to give away to children during transactions. She offered it to Isabella with a gentle smile. These are my favorite. Do you like chocolate chip? Isabella's face lit up with the unguarded joy of 3-year-olds. Yes, thank you. You're very welcome. Elena looked back at James. Mr. Hayes, I noticed your account has been with us for 4 years. I want you to know there is no minimum balance requirement for standard checking. If anyone tells you differently, they're mistaken. The careful phrasing, the subtle correction, the way she was telling him he had been lied to without directly accusing her superior. James felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of unexpected integrity. Diana's research had not mentioned Elena Chen specifically, just another teller, presumably. But this woman was different. This woman saw him, saw Marcus Hayes as a person rather than a problem. I appreciate that. I was told sometimes policies get confused. Elena's voice stayed neutral, professional, but her eyes held understanding. If you have any other questions, my name is Elena Chen. I'm here Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Please don't hesitate to ask. She slid a business card across the counter, and James took it automatically. Studying the simple cardstock with Sterling Trust Bank's logo and Elena Chen's name in direct extension printed in modest font. A lifeline extended to a stranger who appeared to need one. Isabella was already eating her cookie, chocolate smearing her fingers, oblivious to the small drama unfolding around her. James pulled a napkin from the counter dispenser and cleaned her hands with the practiced efficiency of actual fathers, playing his role to the end. Thank you, Miss Chen. You've been very kind. Just doing my job, Mr. Hayes. But she smiled again, and James recognized in that expression the same quality his mother had possessed, the ability to maintain decency in the face of a system designed to erode it. He gathered Isabella in the backpack, preparing to leave, when Elena spoke once more, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Mr. Hayes, about job hunting, there's a community resource center on 82nd that helps with resume building and interview skills. Free services. My father used them when he first immigrated. They're good people. The gesture touched James in a way Victoria's cruelty had not. This was empathy made action. This was someone seeing past the immediate transaction to the human being struggling within it. This was what Sterling Trust Bank was supposed to be, distilled into one teller who apparently understood the mission better than senior management. I'll look into that, thank you. James walked toward the exit, Isabella's hand in his, the lobby already forgetting them as new customers entered with their larger problems and more valuable accounts. But as he pushed through the revolving door back into Portland's gray mist, he felt the weight of what he had learned settling into his bones. He had come seeking evidence of discrimination. He had found it clear and undeniable, wrapped in Victoria Ashford's contempt. But he had also found something unexpected, a counterpoint, a reminder that his mother's dream was not entirely dead. Elena Chen had performed a small act of professional rebellion by simply treating him with dignity, and in doing so had restored something James Morrison had begun to fear he had lost forever. The humanity at the heart of his mission. He strapped Isabella into her car seat, the little girl already asking questions about lunch and when they would play pretend again. James drove away from Sterling Trust Bank with his mind already working through the implications, the evidence gathered, the changes that needed to be made. But underneath the strategic planning, beneath the chairman's cold analysis, James felt something warmer stirring. He had walked into that bank as Marcus Hayes to test his employees' integrity. He had left with his faith in the bank's mission shaken and simultaneously reinforced. Some people had forgotten why Sterling Trust Bank existed. One person had not. The question now was what he would do about both truths. James returned Isabella to Sarah's house by 11:30, his niece chattering the entire drive about the nice lady who gave her cookies and how playing Marcus was fun, but she was ready to be just Isabella again. Sarah met them at the door with questions in her eyes, but James shook his head, not yet, not in front of the child, and promised to call her that evening. He drove back to his penthouse in silence, the weight of Monday morning settling into something harder than evidence, something personal. Diana was waiting in his office when he arrived, her laptop already open, security footage from the bank queued and ready. She had accessed the feeds remotely, using the access codes James maintained for exactly this kind of situation, monitoring his own empire, watching from angles customers never imagined existed. How bad? Her question came clinical, professional, but Diana had worked with him long enough to read the tension in his shoulders. Worse than the report suggested. James shed Marcus Hayes' flannel shirt, replacing it with one of the tailored Oxfords that lived in his office closet. The transformation back felt like peeling off dead skin. Victoria Ashford told me there was a minimum balance requirement that doesn't exist. Suggested I was a bad parent for maintaining a bank account when I should be focused on childcare. Made it clear I wasn't welcome. Diana's fingers moved across her keyboard, pulling up files. I've been digging while you were gone. Victoria's client list is exclusively high net worth individuals. Minimum account value of $500,000. Her performance bonuses are structured around client retention and upselling premium services, which means she has every financial incentive to discourage low-balance customers from staying. That's not how I structured the compensation model. No, but Richard Chen modified it 18 months ago when he became CFO. Pushed through changes in how branch performance is measured. More weight on profit per customer rather than total customer satisfaction. James felt anger kindle fresh and cold. Richard Chen, hired 3 years ago with impeccable credentials from Wells Fargo, brought in specifically to streamline operations and increase margins. James had trusted him to maintain the bank's values while improving efficiency. Instead, Richard had quietly rebuilt the incentive structure to reward exactly the kind of behavior James had spent 40 years trying to eliminate. Show me the footage. Diana swiveled her laptop. The security camera angle showed the lobby from above, wide lens capturing the marble expanse and the small drama that had unfolded. James watched himself enter as Marcus Hayes watched the other customers' subtle movements away, watched Brian the teller's dismissive efficiency, then Victoria's appearance, her body language screaming superiority even in silent surveillance footage, her gestures sharp and final as she delivered her verdict. The camera captured what James had felt but not seen, the way other customers noticed and looked away, embarrassed witnesses to casual cruelty, the way Victoria's smile never reached her eyes, the way she turned her back on Marcus Hayes while he still held his sleeping daughter, dismissal made physical. Then Elena Chen's intervention. Diana had isolated that moment, zooming in on Elena's expression as she watched the confrontation unfold. James saw the calculation happen, the awareness of risk, the decision to act anyway. Elena's approach to Victoria carried visible tension, her professionalism armor against inevitable consequences. Elena Chen. Diana pulled up a personnel file. 34 years old, 5 years with Sterling Trust Bank. Started as a teller, never promoted despite consistently high customer satisfaction scores. Father is David Chen, 70 years old, lives with Elena in Northeast Portland. He has Parkinson's disease. That's in her health insurance claims. No other family on record. Why hasn't she been promoted? Her file shows 3 recommendations from branch managers over the past 4 years, all blocked at the district level by Diana's finger traced across the screen. Victoria Ashford and Richard Chen. Notation says Elena lacks the professional polish required for client-facing management positions. Professional polish, code for a dozen things that had nothing to do with competence and everything to do with bias. James knew the language, had fought against it his entire career, and here it was thriving in his own company like mold in darkness. Pull Richard Chen's complete revision of the compensation structure. I want to see every change he made, every incentive he shifted. And get me Victoria Ashford's complete client portfolio. I want to know if she's actively pushing low-income customers to close accounts. Diana's fingers flew. On it. But Jim, you should know, Richard Chen is currently dating Victoria Ashford. They've been seen together at company events for the past 6 months. The pieces clicked into place with ugly clarity. Richard redesigning compensation to reward Victoria's behavior. Victoria executing a strategy that maximized her bonuses while violating every principle Sterling Trust Bank claimed to uphold. Both of them profiting from a system they had corrupted together, protected by their own success metrics. James moved to his window, looking down at the city where his mother had once lived and struggled in Baden without ever seeing him succeed. He had built this company as a monument to her memory, a promise that banking could be different, and parasites like Richard Chen and Victoria Ashford had hollowed it out from within, turning it into exactly what he had sworn to destroy. I'm going back. The decision formed as he spoke it. Not today. Tomorrow. I need to see more. Diana looked up sharply. Sir, you got what you needed. You have grounds to fire Victoria Ashford immediately. You have documentation of policy violations, customer mistreatment. I need to see Elena Chen. Really see her. One interaction isn't enough. James turned from the window. If she's as good as she appeared, she deserves better than this branch. But I need to be certain. I need to see her work, see how she handles difficult situations, understand what kind of manager she could become. You're going back as Marcus Hayes. 6 more times over the next 2 weeks. Different situations, different problems. Each one designed to stress test both Victoria's cruelty and Elena's integrity. Diana closed her laptop slowly. You're not just investigating anymore, Jim. You're fixating. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. James felt the truth of it even as he rejected the implication. This was not fixation. This was thoroughness. This was ensuring he made the right decisions, not just about punishment, but about promotion. Elena Chen had shown him something rare in that brief interaction, the kind of principled service his mother would have recognized and valued. If she could sustain that quality under pressure, if her integrity held across multiple tests, then she was exactly the kind of leader Sterling Trust Bank needed. And if James was being honest with himself, In the privacy of his own thoughts, where no board member could hear, there was something else. Something about the way Elena had looked at Marcus Hayes, had seen past the shabby clothes to the human being beneath, had treated him not as a charity case, but as a person deserving of basic dignity. That recognition had touched James in ways he was not ready to examine too closely. I'll return as Marcus tomorrow. Same account, different problem. Diana, I need you to engineer situations that require teller assistance, each visit escalating in complexity. What kind of situations? James thought through the possibilities. Tomorrow, a check that needs verification. Wednesday, questions about opening a savings account for Isabella. Friday, a complaint about an unauthorized fee, each scenario designed to see how both Victoria and Elena respond when Marcus Hayes keeps coming back. Victoria will notice. She'll recognize you as a recurring problem. Good. I want to see what she does when the problem won't go away. Diana reopened her laptop, resignation in the gesture. I'll set it up, but Jim, when you keep testing Elena, make sure you're clear on what you're actually testing for. Because from where I'm sitting, this is looking less like investigation and more like something else. James did not answer. Could not answer honestly without admitting that Diana might be right. He returned to his desk and spent the afternoon reviewing the files she compiled, the evidence of corruption spreading through his company like cancer. Richard Chen's fingerprints were everywhere. Subtle changes to policy, modifications to performance reviews, adjustments to promotion criteria that systematically rewarded profit extraction over customer service. By evening, James had a clear picture of the disease. Richard and Victoria had built a perfect system of mutual benefit, each protecting the other's position while maximizing their own compensation. Victoria brought in wealthy clients and drove away expensive poor ones. Richard structured the bonuses to reward exactly that behavior. Together, they had created a machine designed to filter Sterling Trust Bank's customer base toward maximum profitability and minimum moral responsibility. Tomorrow, James would return as Marcus Hayes and see how deep the rot had spread. But tonight, he sat alone in his penthouse with a glass of whiskey and Elena Chen's business card, studying the simple cardstock like it held answers to questions he had not yet learned to ask. Tuesday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, Portland's weather performing one of its characteristic reversals. James dressed again in Marcus Hayes' clothes, the wrongness feeling less foreign now, his body learning the physical vocabulary of poverty. He skipped shaving again, let his stubble grow towards something that might charitably be called a beard, but looked more like neglect. Isabella was in preschool, so James went alone this time. He carried the backpack Diana had provided, now stuffed with carefully selected props. A paycheck stub showing $800 from a temporary agency, a utility bill marked past due, papers that told Marcus Hayes' story without words. Diana had also provided a check from a fictitious employer, made out to Marcus Hayes for $600, 2 weeks' work at a warehouse job, the kind of employment that kept people trapped just above drowning. Sterling Trust Bank looked different in sunshine, less cathedral and more fortress. James entered at 10:15 during the mid-morning lull when the rush of early banking had passed, but lunch hour had not yet arrived. 4 customers waited, none of them the expensive kind Victoria favored. 2 elderly women, a young man in a fast food uniform, a mother with twin toddlers already showing signs of impending meltdown. Brian was at window 1 again, Elena at window 3. No sign of Victoria, though her office door stood open, suggesting she was somewhere in the building. James joined the queue behind the mother with twins, close enough to hear Elena patiently helping one of the elderly women understand her statement, explaining each line item with a clarity that never condescended. When James's turn came, Elena looked up and recognition flickered across her features. Surprise, followed by something that might have been concern. She gestured him forward, her professional mask settling into place. Mr. Hayes, good morning. How can I help you today? James laid the check on the counter. I got paid yesterday. I need to deposit this, but I wanted to make sure it clears before I try to use the money. Last time I deposited a check, it took a week and I overdrafted because I thought the money was available. Elena picked up the check, studying it with the same careful attention she had given his identification the day before. Her eyes moved across the details. Employer name, amount, signature. James watched her process the information, saw the moment she noticed the address on the check matched a known temporary staffing agency. This should clear in 2 business days. I can deposit it now, but the funds won't be fully available until Thursday morning. Is there any way to make it faster? I have bills due Wednesday. Unfortunately, check holds are based on federal regulations and the issuing bank's processing time. However, Elena turned to her computer, typing quickly, I can see your account history shows you've been with us for several years without significant issues. I can request an exception to release half the funds immediately and the rest on Thursday. The solution was creative, bending policy without breaking it, finding space within regulations to serve actual need rather than hiding behind them. James felt the same recognition he had experienced the day before. This woman understood the difference between rules and purpose, between policy and service. That would help. Thank you. Elena processed the deposit, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency across her keyboard. She printed the receipt and circled the available balance, then circled again the date when full funds would clear. Small gestures of clarity, making sure Marcus Hayes understood exactly where he stood. Mr. Hayes, I noticed you mentioned overdrafts in the past. Did you know we offer account alerts? You can get text messages when your balance drops below a certain amount. It's free, and it might help you avoid fees. I didn't know that was an option. Most people don't. Let me set it up for you. More typing, Elena pulling up settings Marcus Hayes had never accessed. What threshold would you like? I'd recommend setting it at $100 so you get a warning before you're close to zero. That sounds good. Elena configured the alerts, explaining each step in language that assumed intelligence, but not prior knowledge. The difference was subtle but significant. She was teaching rather than condescending, empowering rather than patronizing. James watched her work and understood why Victoria and Richard had blocked her promotions. Elena made customers smarter about their own finances, helped them avoid the fees and penalties that padded bank profits. She was too good at actual service to be profitable by Richard Chen's metrics. The transaction completed, Elena slid the receipt across the counter along with a small pamphlet. This explains all our account services, including the alerts we just set up. And Mr. Hayes, about those bills due Wednesday. If any of them are utilities, most companies offer payment plans if you call them directly. Don't wait for disconnect notices. Call today, explain your situation. They're usually more flexible than people expect. The advice came gentle and unbidden, another small act of service beyond the transaction. James accepted the PAM-FAM with genuine gratitude bleeding through Marcus Hayes' weariness. I appreciate that. I didn't know I could negotiate. Most people don't, but you can negotiate almost anything if you ask respectfully and explain your circumstances. Remember that. James nodded, gathering his papers. As he turned to leave, Victoria Ashford emerged from her office, coffee cup in hand, her gaze sweeping the lobby with the territorial assessment of a predator monitoring its hunting ground. Her eyes landed on James and something cold flickered across her expression. Recognition. Annoyance. The problem customer had returned. Victoria moved to intercept him before he reached the door, her heels marking her approach with sharp clicks against marble. Her smile was as artificial as Monday's had been. Mr. Hayes, back again so soon? The implication clear. Why are you here? Why don't you go away? Why won't you find another bank to bother? James met her gaze with Marcus Hayes' tired eyes. Just depositing my paycheck, ma'am. I see. Well, I hope Miss Chen was able to assist you adequately. The word adequately carried weight, suggestion that Elena's assistance might have been insufficient or inappropriate. Victoria's attention flicked past James to Elena's station, and James saw Elena's shoulders stiffen, awareness of being watched combining with the awareness of being judged. She was very helpful. Wonderful. Victoria's smile remained fixed. Though I do hope you won't make this a daily habit, Mr. Hayes. We do have many customers to serve. The dismissal landed soft but unmistakable. James forced Marcus Hayes to duck his head, to accept the rebuke without challenge. He mumbled something about only coming when necessary and fled toward the exit, feeling Victoria's gaze follow him like a cold hand between his shoulder blades. Outside, James stood in the sunshine and let his hands shake with the anger he had suppressed. Victoria Ashford was worse than Monday's evidence suggested. She was not simply indifferent to poor customers. She actively worked to drive them away, to make them uncomfortable enough that they would close their accounts and find services elsewhere. Each interaction designed to communicate unwelcome. Each word calculated to erode what little dignity poverty left intact. And Elena Chen was caught in the middle, trying to do her job with integrity, while her superior undermined every effort. The dynamic was toxic, unsustainable. Something would break. Either Elena would learn Victoria's cruelty, or she would be crushed by it. James drove back to his office with his jaw tight and his mind already planning Wednesday's visit. Wednesday arrived gray and drizzling, Portland's weather reverting to its default setting. James prepared Marcus Hayes with increasing ease, the performance becoming second nature. He brought Isabella again today. Sarah had agreed to 3 visits total, and James needed to see how the bank treated Marcus Hayes as a parent trying to plan for his daughter's future. They entered Sterling Trust Bank at 2 in the afternoon, Isabella energetic after preschool, her chatter filling the quiet lobby. 3 customers waited, all of them middle-aged professionals conducting business with the efficient detachment of people for whom banking was a minor inconvenience rather than a source of stress. Brian's station was empty today, replaced by a young woman whose name tag read Jennifer. Elena stood at window 3, currently helping an older gentleman navigate online banking on a tablet. James watched her patience, the way she adjusted her explanations based on the customer's understanding, never rushing despite the complexity of the topic. Victoria emerged from her office almost immediately, as if she had been waiting. Her expression when she saw James and Isabella combined recognition with barely concealed irritation. She approached before James could join the queue, her body language blocking his path to the teller stations. "Mr. Hayes, becoming quite the regular, aren't you?" Isabella tugged on James's hand. "Daddy, is that the mean lady?" The words rang clear in the lobby's acoustics, drawing attention from other customers. Victoria's expression hardened, color rising in her cheeks. James squeezed Isabella's hand gently. "Bella, that's not polite." But the damage was done, and James felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. Children had a gift for seeing through artifice, for naming truths adults learned to ignore. Victoria was the mean lady. A 3-year-old had diagnosed the problem in 3 words. Victoria's voice came tight and controlled. "Mr. Hayes, perhaps we should speak privately about your continued visits to this branch. I'm just here to open a savings account for my daughter. That's something that can be done online. You don't need to come into the branch. I don't have internet at home right now. I need to do it here." Victoria's jaw clenched. "Miss Chen can assist you, but Mr. Hayes, I must insist that you control your daughter's behavior while you're in the bank. We maintain professional standards." She stalked back to her office before James could respond, and he felt Isabella shrink against his leg, confused by the adult tension. He knelt down, meeting his niece's eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong, Bella. Sometimes grown-ups are having bad days." "She didn't like me." "That's her problem, not yours. Come on, let's see if Miss Elena can help us." Elena's customer had finished, and she waved James forward with a welcoming smile that included Isabella. The little girl brightened immediately, remembering cookies and kindness. "Hi, Miss Elena." "Hello, sweetheart." "And hello, Mr. Hayes. What can I help you with today?" James lifted Isabella onto the chair beside him, keeping one hand on her shoulder. "I want to open a savings account for Bella, just something small, maybe $5 a month. I want her to learn about saving money." Elena's expression softened with something James could not quite name. Approval? Recognition of a parent trying despite circumstances? She pulled out a form, then paused. "Mr. Hayes, for a child's savings account, we normally recommend our Young Savers program. No minimum balance, no monthly fees, and we add $1 for every $5 deposited, up to $20 per year. It's designed specifically for parents who want to teach financial literacy." James had approved that program himself 4 years ago, funding it from his personal wealth because the board had deemed it unprofitable. Hearing Elena describe it, understanding she was guiding Marcus Hayes toward the best possible option, despite it generating 0 revenue for the bank, reinforced everything he had begun to suspect about her integrity. "That sounds perfect. How do I start?" Elena walked him through the paperwork, explaining each section in language Isabella could partially understand, making the child feel included in her own financial planning. She asked Isabella what she wanted to save for, and the little girl answered with 3-year-old logic. A cat! A big orange cat named Pumpkin! That's a wonderful goal. Elena wrote savings goal cat in the notes section, treating Isabella's dream with the same seriousness she would treat an adult's retirement planning. Now, every time your daddy puts money in this account, you'll be getting closer to Pumpkin the cat. Isabella bounced in her chair with excitement, and James felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. This was what banking should be. Not marble and chandeliers and careful exclusion, but human beings helping each other build futures one $5 deposit at a time. Elena processed the account opening, contributing the initial $5 from Marcus Hayes's checking, then adding the bank's matching dollar. There you go, $6 in your savings account, Miss Isabella. You're already on your way to Pumpkin. Thank you, Miss Elena. Isabella hugged the receipt Elena handed her like it was a treasure map. Elena leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice so only James could hear. Mr. Hayes, I noticed you mentioned not having internet at home. The Multnomah County Library has free internet access and computers if you need to handle other banking online. They also offer free computer classes if you want to learn more about managing accounts digitally. Another gift of information, another small act of empowerment. James accepted it with a gratitude that was only partially performance. I'll look into that. Thank you. As James gathered Isabella to leave, Victoria appeared again, materializing from her office like a recurring nightmare. Her gaze moved from James to Elena to the paperwork on Elena's desk, and calculation flickered across her features. Miss Chen, a moment please. Mr. Hayes, have a good day. The dismissal was clear, but James lingered near the door, pretending to help Isabella with her coat while actually watching the interaction between Victoria and Elena. Victoria's body language radiated disapproval, her gestures sharp and cutting. Elena's shoulders squared, but she nodded at whatever reprimand Victoria delivered. James stepped outside into the drizzle with Isabella's hand in his and murder in his heart. Victoria was not just cruel to customers, she was punishing Elena for showing kindness. The toxicity ran deeper than he had imagined, and Elena was trapped in it, trying to maintain her integrity while her supervisor systematically attacked her for it. Thursday and Friday followed similar patterns. James returned each day with new problems, new needs, each visit designed to test both Victoria's hostility and Elena's patience. Thursday brought questions about overdraft protection. Friday featured a complaint about an unexpected fee. Each time, Elena solved the problem with efficiency and grace. Each time, Victoria appeared to radiate disapproval and thinly veiled threats. By Friday afternoon, James had seen enough. Victoria Ashford was beyond redemption, her cruelty systematic and intentional. But Elena Chen was exactly what Sterling Trust Bank needed. Principled, competent, genuinely committed to service over profit. She deserved promotion. She deserved protection. She deserved to work somewhere her values were reinforced rather than punished. James returned to his office and called Diana. Monday morning, I'm going to reveal myself. I want Victoria Ashford, Richard Chen, and Thomas Bradford in that branch at 9 a.m. No explanation, just mandatory attendance. And I want Elena Chen there too, but don't tell her why. You're ending this. I'm starting it. The investigation is done. Now comes the reckoning. Diana hesitated, unusual for her. Jim, have you considered what happens to Elena when you promote her over Victoria's head? The other managers will resent her. They'll assume she slept her way up or that you're playing favorites. Then I'll make it clear she earned it. I'll show them the metrics, the customer feedback, the evidence of her competence. And your interest in her? Is that purely professional? James felt the question land like a scalpel between ribs. I barely know her. You've spent 5 days studying her like she's the only employee in your company. That's not investigation, Jim. That's infatuation. The word hung between them, sharp and uncomfortable. James wanted to reject it, to argue that Diana was wrong, that he was simply being thorough. But somewhere in the past week, his observation of Elena Chen had shifted from professional assessment to something murkier. He admired her competence, yes, He respected her integrity, absolutely. But there was more. The way she smiled at Isabella. The way she treated Marcus Hayes with dignity when she had every reason to dismiss him. The way she moved through a hostile workplace maintaining grace under Victoria's constant pressure. James Morrison, 52-year-old chairman of Sterling Trust Bank, was developing feelings for a 34-year-old teller who had no idea who he really was. Monday. His voice came firm, shutting down the conversation. I'll handle it Monday. He ended the call and stood alone in his office, watching the city below and wondering when exactly his investigation had become personal. When the mission to protect his company's integrity had tangled itself with the recognition that Elena Chen might be the first woman in years who saw value in something other than his wealth. She had shown kindness to Marcus Hayes, a poor, struggling, single father with nothing to offer. She had not known he was James Morrison when she treated him like he mattered. That authenticity was rare and precious. James wanted more of it, wanted to know Elena Chen without the performance of poverty between them, wanted to see if the warmth she showed Marcus Hayes might extend to the real man beneath the disguise. But first, he had to destroy her supervisor's career and potentially upend her entire workplace. Not exactly a romantic foundation. Monday would be complicated in ways James had not planned when he first conceived this investigation. But Monday was inevitable now. The machinery was in motion. All that remained was to see who survived the collision. Saturday, James spent reviewing footage, preparing documentation, building the case that would end Victoria Ashford's and Richard Chen's careers. Sunday, he paced his penthouse like a caged animal, running through scenarios, anticipating arguments, planning responses. And Sunday night, alone with whiskey and the business card Elena had given Marcus Hayes, James acknowledged the truth Diana had named. He was not just investigating anymore. He was not just protecting his company's integrity. He was pursuing something dangerous and complicated. The possibility of connection with someone who had seen him at his lowest and chosen kindness anyway. Elena Chen had no idea what was coming. Had no idea that the poor man she had helped 5 times was actually the chairman who controlled her entire career. Had no idea that Monday morning would change everything. James hoped she would forgive him. Hoped she would understand why the deception had been necessary. Hoped that beneath the shock and confusion, she might see the same thing in him that he was beginning to see in her. The potential for something real in a world built on performance and calculation. But first he had to survive Monday. Had to navigate the explosion of revelation without losing the fragile thread of possibility that had formed between Marcus Hayes and Elena Chen. Had to transform from ghost to man without destroying the trust that had been freely given to someone who no longer existed. James set down his whiskey and picked up his phone, dialed Thomas Bradford's personal number. The CEO answered on the 3rd ring, his voice rough with Sunday evening relaxation. Jim, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Tom. Everything's about to be right. Monday morning, 9 a.m., Sterling Trust Bank, downtown Portland. You, me, Victoria Ashford, Richard Chen, conference room, mandatory attendance. What's this about? The reckoning I promised. The truth about what we've become. James paused, considering his next words carefully. And Tom, bring HR. We're going to need them. Jesus. Okay, I'll be there. James ended the call and moved to his window, watching the city lights blur in the rain that had returned with nightfall. Somewhere out there, Elena Chen was probably helping her father with evening medication, unaware that tomorrow her life would shift in ways she could not anticipate. Unaware that the chairman had been watching her, testing her, falling for her competence and kindness in equal measure. Tomorrow, Marcus Hayes would cease to exist. Tomorrow, James Morrison would emerge from the shadows of his own investigation. Tomorrow, the careful architecture of deception would collapse, and in its ruins, something new would have to be built. James pressed his palm against the cold glass and wondered what Elena would see when the performance ended. Would she see James Morrison, the chairman who had lied to her? Or would she see the man beneath, the one who had never stopped being real despite all the pretense? Monday would answer everything. Monday would burn away the false and leave only truth standing. Monday, James would discover whether the connection forged in deception could survive exposure to light. He turned from the window and began preparing for war. Monday morning broke clear and cold, the kind of November day that made Portland's steel and glass buildings look sharp enough to draw blood. James Morrison dressed in his chairman's armor, Brioni suit the color of charcoal, Hermes tie, Italian leather shoes that cost more than Marcus Hayes earned in a month. He stood before his bathroom mirror and watched the transformation complete itself. Poverty shed like a snake's skin, wealth and authority reasserting themselves in fabric and posture. The man looking back bore little resemblance to the exhausted father who had carried a sleeping child through bank doors a week ago. Diana met him in the parking garage at 7:30, two folders thick with documentation in her arms. Her expression carried the wariness of someone watching a friend walk toward a cliff edge. Everything's arranged. Thomas, Victoria, and Richard will be in the conference room at 9. Elena Chen has been told there's a mandatory staff meeting regarding customer service protocols. She doesn't know you'll be there. James accepted the folders, flipping through evidence he had already memorized. Security footage, transaction records, customer complaints, the architecture of corruption rendered in spreadsheets and video timestamps. Everything needed to dismantle two careers and rebuild a third. In HR, Margaret Chen, no relation to Elena, will be present as witness. I've briefed her on the termination protocols. She's prepared for the legal exposure. Richard Chen will threaten to sue. Let him. We have documentation of embezzlement. He can choose between quiet termination or criminal prosecution. James closed the folders and met Diana's eyes. You think I'm making a mistake. I think you're about to promote a woman who believes you're a struggling single father. And you haven't considered how that betrayal will land. She showed you kindness when she thought you were Marcus Hayes. When she learns you lied, that kindness will feel like currency you paid with false bills. The observation cut clean and deep. James had spent the weekend constructing justifications. The investigation was necessary. The deception required. The ends justified the means. But Diana was right about the human element he had systematically avoided examining. Elena had treated Marcus Hayes with dignity because that was who she was. She had given freely of empathy and service because her values demanded it. And James had tested those values like a scientist prodding specimens under glass, never considering how the specimen might feel about being observed. I'll explain. She'll understand why it had to be this way. Will she? Or will she understand that the chairman of her company manipulated her for a week to satisfy his own curiosity? Diana shifted the remaining folder in her arms. Jim, I've worked with you for 15 years. I know you're capable of compartmentalizing business from personal, but this situation requires you to integrate them, and I'm not sure you know how. James took the second folder. I'll figure it out. Before or after you destroy her workplace and upend her career? I'm not destroying anything. I'm cleaning out corruption and promoting someone who deserves recognition. You're promoting someone you're attracted to. That's going to complicate everything, whether you acknowledge it or not. The words hung between them in the concrete silence of the parking garage, truth delivered with the precision of a scalpel. James wanted to deny it, to argue that his interest in Elena Chen was purely professional, that her competence and integrity justified promotion regardless of any personal feelings. But Diana knew him too well, had watched him study security footage of Elena's interactions with customers the way art collectors studied paintings, had seen the shift in his focus from investigation to fixation. This conversation is over. I have a meeting to attend. Diana stepped aside without further comment, and James walked to his Mercedes, sliding into leather seats that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The drive to Sterling Trust Bank took 12 minutes through downtown traffic, Portland's morning commuters creating their usual gridlock. James used the time to review his opening statement, the words he would use to strip away Victoria Ashford's career and Richard Chen's future. But beneath the cold calculus of professional destruction, anxiety churned in his gut. Elena would be there. Elena would learn the truth. Elena would look at him and see a liar, a manipulator, a wealthy man who had played at poverty to test her integrity like some kind of sadistic game. Unless he could make her understand why it mattered. Unless he could show her that Marcus Hayes had been performance, but the recognition of her value was real. James parked in the underground garage reserved for executives, taking the private elevator to the third floor, where the branch's administrative offices clustered away from customer view. The conference room waited at the end of a hallway decorated with photographs of Sterling Trust Bank's history. His history, captured in ribbon cuttings, in groundbreaking ceremonies and award presentations. James Morrison's face smiled from a dozen frames, the public persona of success and vision. None of those photographs showed the scared 12-year-old who had watched his mother cry in the rain. Thomas Bradford stood outside the conference room, coffee cup in hand, his expression grave. The CEO had known James long enough to read the weather in his friend's face. This is going to be bad. It needs to be. James checked his watch. 8:55. Are they here? Victoria and Richard arrived 10 minutes ago, both of them radiating confusion and annoyance. Victoria's demanding to know why a mandatory meeting wasn't on her calendar. Richard keeps checking his phone like he's expecting an escape route to materialize. Elena? In the break room, Margaret's keeping her company, making small talk about weekend plans. The poor woman has no idea she's about to be caught in an explosion. James felt guilt twist in his chest, but he pushed it down beneath layers of executive decisiveness. This confrontation was necessary. Elena would benefit from it eventually, even if the immediate aftermath felt like collateral damage. Let's begin. They entered the conference room together, James's presence dropping into the space like a stone into still water. Victoria Ashford sat at the table beside Richard Chen, both of them dressed in their professional best, both of them registering shock as the chairman of Sterling Trust Bank walked through the door. Victoria's composure cracked for half a second before reasserting itself. Richard's face went carefully blank, the expression of someone trained to hide reactions. Margaret Chen from Human Resources occupied the far corner, laptop open, recording software already running. She nodded at James with professional neutrality, a witness prepared to document whatever came next. Mr. Morrison. Victoria recovered first, standing and extending her hand with the smooth automaticity of someone practiced at managing unexpected authority. We weren't informed you would be attending this meeting. James ignored her hand, moving to the head of the table and remaining standing. Sit down, Ms. Ashford. The command came flat and cold, carrying weight that made Victoria sink back into her chair without further protest. Richard shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming once against the table before stilling. Both of them were recalculating, trying to understand why the chairman himself was here, what they had done or failed to do that warranted this level of attention. James opened his first folder, pulling out the top document, a printed screenshot of Victoria's interaction with Marcus Hayes, the moment when she had told him to focus on childcare rather than maintaining a bank account. He slid it across the table. Miss Ashford, do you recognize this customer? Victoria glanced at the image, her expression flickering through confusion before settling on dismissive recognition. That's Mr. Hayes, a low-balance customer who's been coming to the branch frequently. I've assisted him several times. Assisted. James repeated the word like it tasted foul. Is that what you call telling a customer there's a minimum balance requirement that doesn't exist? Victoria's eyes widened fractionally. There may have been a miscommunication about policy. There was no miscommunication. There was deliberate misinformation designed to drive away a customer you deemed unprofitable. James pulled out another document, this one showing Richard Chen's modifications to the branch compensation structure. And Mr. Chen here restructured your bonuses to reward exactly that behavior. Drive away the poor, cultivate the wealthy, maximize profit per customer regardless of the human cost. Richard leaned forward, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. Sir, with all respect, those compensation changes were approved by the board. I made recommendations based on industry best practices. Industry best practices that violate every principle this company was founded on. Sterling Trust Bank exists to serve everyone, Mr. Chen, not just those who can maintain six-figure balances. The bank exists to be profitable, Mr. Morrison. Sentiment doesn't pay shareholder dividends. The mask had dropped. Richard Chen was showing his true face now, the mercenary beneath the corporate polish. James felt his anger crystallize into something colder and more focused. You're fired, both of you, effective immediately. Victoria shot to her feet, her composure shattering completely. You can't do that. I've brought in $8 million in profit. My performance reviews are flawless. Your performance reviews were written by Mr. Chen, who was simultaneously dating you and embezzling from client accounts. Both documents are now suspect. James pulled out the embezzlement evidence, laying it on the table like a prosecutor displaying murder weapons. 12 high net worth accounts showing irregular transfers to a Delaware LLC owned by Mr. Chen's wife. $2.3 million over 18 months. I can have the FBI here within the hour, or you can resign quietly and face only civil penalties. Richard's face had gone pale, his careful composure cracking to reveal the trapped animal beneath. Those transfers were investment reallocations. Perfectly legal portfolio management. Without client authorization or documentation? Try again. Thomas Bradford stepped forward, placing termination paperwork on the table in front of both Victoria and Richard. Sign these. You have 5 minutes. Your personal effects will be shipped to you. Building security is waiting outside to escort you from the premises. Victoria's hands shook as she stared at the papers. This is insane. You're destroying my career over helping low-income customers understand their limitations? I'm destroying your career because you forgot that those customers are human beings. James leaned forward, his voice dropping to something quiet and lethal. My mother was once that poor woman you couldn't be bothered to treat with basic dignity. She died believing banks existed to humiliate people like her. I built this company to prove her wrong, and you turned it back into exactly what I swore it would never become. The words fell into silence, heavy as concrete. Victoria's gaze flickered between James and the termination papers, calculation visible in her eyes. Fighting would mean exposure, publicity, the detailed documentation of her cruelty entered into public record. Signing meant quiet exit, the ability to spin her departure as pursuing other opportunities. She picked up the pen with shaking fingers and signed. Richard took longer, his jaw clenched with barely suppressed fury. But he signed too, because the alternative was criminal prosecution and prison time. They stood together, two people who had corrupted James's company from within, now stripped of power and authority in future. Security will escort you out through the back entrance. You're not to contact any Sterling Trust Bank employees or customers. Violation of this requirement will result in immediate legal action. Thomas gestured toward the door. Goodbye. Victoria walked out with her spine straight and her head high, performing dignity she no longer possessed. Richard followed with murder in his eyes, the look of someone who would spend years nursing grievance and plotting revenge. The door closed behind them with the finality of guillotines. James exhaled slowly, feeling the adrenaline of confrontation drain away and leave something like exhaustion in its wake. The first phase was complete. Victoria and Richard were gone, excised like tumors, but the surgery was not finished. Elena still waited in the break room, unaware that her world was about to shift beneath her feet. Margaret looked up from her laptop. That was remarkably restrained, Mr. Morrison. I expected more shouting. They're not worth the energy, but Margaret, I need you to stay for the next conversation. Elena Chen is about to be offered a promotion, and I want HR present as witness to ensure everything is documented properly. Elena Chen, the teller who's been blocked from advancement for 3 years? Margaret pulled up files on her laptop. I reviewed her personnel record this morning. She's been recommended for promotion multiple times. Each recommendation was denied by Victoria Ashford and Richard Chen with notations about lacking professional polish. Professional polish is code for bias. Elena Chen is the best employee in this branch, and I'm promoting her to branch manager effective immediately. Thomas cleared his throat. Jim, that's jumping her several levels. There's going to be pushback from other managers who've been waiting for positions. The optics are that I'm promoting the person who actually understands what this company is supposed to be. James gathered his folders. Bring her in. Thomas left the conference room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. James stood at the window overlooking the branch floor below, watching customers move through their morning banking, unaware of the tectonic shifts happening in the administrative offices above. He thought about Marcus Hayes, the ghost he had performed for a week, and wondered how to explain that performance to Elena without sounding like a monster. You had to become invisible to see who would still see you. You had to pretend poverty to learn who treated the poor with dignity. But those explanations sounded hollow even in his own mind, excuses for what was ultimately manipulation. Diana had been right. James had tested Elena like a specimen, and now he had to face the human cost of that experiment. The door opened. Elena Chen entered the conference room wearing her bank uniform, her expression confused and slightly anxious. Her gaze moved from James to Margaret to Thomas, trying to decode the situation from body language and context. She stood near the door as if ready to flee. "Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry. I thought this was a staff meeting about customer service." "It is. Please sit down, Miss Chen." Elena moved to the table with visible reluctance, her hands clasped in her lap, her shoulders carrying the tension of someone expecting reprimand. James watched her arrange her features into professional neutrality and felt his heart constrict with the knowledge that he was about to shatter that careful composure. "Miss Chen, you've been with Sterling Trust Bank for 5 years. Your customer satisfaction ratings are consistently the highest in your branch. You've been recommended for promotion 3 times. Each recommendation was blocked by Victoria Ashford and Richard Chen. Do you know why?" Elena's eyes widened slightly. No, sir. I was told I needed to develop more professional polish. That was a lie designed to keep you from advancing. The truth is that you were too good at your job. You helped customers avoid fees, educated them about financial literacy, treated low-income clients with the same respect as wealthy ones. That behavior was unprofitable according to the metrics Richard Chen implemented. So they kept you locked at entry level where your integrity could be contained. Lena sat very still, processing information that was rewriting her understanding of the past 3 years. "Sir, I don't understand why you're telling me this." "Because as of this morning, Victoria Ashford and Richard Chen no longer work for Sterling Trust Bank. They've been terminated for policy violations and ethical breaches. And I'm offering you Victoria's position. Branch manager, immediate promotion with commensurate salary increase, and full authority to restructure customer service protocols as you see fit." The words dropped like stones into deep water, their impact spreading outward in ripples Elena could not yet comprehend. She stared at James with an expression that cycled through shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. "Branch manager? Sir, I'm not qualified." "You're more qualified than anyone else in this building. I've spent the past week watching you work. I know exactly what you're capable of." Elena's brow furrowed, confusion sharpening into something else. "Watching me work, sir, I don't understand." And here it was, the moment of revelation, the point where Marcus Hayes had to die so James Morrison could live, and Elena Chen would learn that the man she had shown kindness to was a fiction designed to test her. James opened his second folder and pulled out Marcus Hayes' driver's license, laying it on the table between them. "This is me. For the past week, I've been coming to your branch disguised as Marcus Hayes, a poor single father with a struggling bank account and a young daughter. I needed to see how this branch treated customers in genuine financial hardship. I needed evidence of the discrimination that 47 complaints had alleged, but no one could prove." Elena picked up the license with trembling fingers, her face draining of color as she studied the photograph. Recognition crashed over her features like a wave. The resemblance was obvious once you knew to look for it, but context had blinded her to the truth. Marcus Hayes, the struggling father, and James Morrison, the chairman, inhabited such different worlds that her brain had never connected them. "You lied to me." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Everything was a lie." "Not everything. Isabella is real, my niece. The situations were real. The problems Marcus Hayes faced were authentic to what millions of people experience daily. Only the identity was false. You tested me." Elena set the license down like it burned her fingers. "You came into my workplace pretending to be poor so you could, what? See if I'd treat you badly? See if I'd fail your secret examination? I came to find out why this branch had 47 complaints in 3 months. I needed to see the discrimination firsthand, not filtered through management reports. I needed evidence that would stand up to legal scrutiny. You needed to see if I would be kind to a poor man because you wanted to make sure I deserved promotion." Elena's voice was rising now, shock transmuting into anger. "Did it occur to you that I was kind to Marcus Hayes because that's who I am? That I don't need the chairman of the company testing my humanity like it's something that requires verification? Margaret cleared her throat softly. Miss Chen, perhaps we should— No. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against floor. You want me to be branch manager? To take Victoria's position after you orchestrated her termination based on a week of playing dress-up in thrift store clothes? What happens when I make a decision you disagree with? Will you disguise yourself as a homeless person to test if I'm still sufficiently compassionate? Will you send actors to see if I maintain your standards? James felt the words land like physical blows, each one accurate and deserved. Elena, I understand you're upset, but— Upset? I showed you kindness when I thought you were struggling. I gave you advice, helped your daughter open a savings account, treated you with respect because I thought you needed it. And the entire time you were evaluating me like I was applying for a job I didn't even know existed. Elena's hands were shaking. How am I supposed to trust anything about this promotion? How do I know it's real and not just another test? Because you earned it. Everything I observed was genuine competence and integrity. The promotion is recognition of your value, not compensation for what? For passing your test? For being nice to poor people when the chairman was watching? Elena moved toward the door. I need to think about this. I can't be here right now. Elena, wait. She was gone, the door closing behind her with finality that echoed in the conference room's silence. James stood frozen, watching the space where she had been, his carefully planned revelation having imploded in ways he had not anticipated. He had expected surprise, confusion, perhaps some anger. But the depth of betrayal in Elena's eyes had been devastating. The recognition that someone she had trusted, even in the limited context of teller and customer, had been performing a role while she had been authentic. Thomas broke the silence first. That went well. Shut up, Tom. I'm just noting that Diana predicted exactly this reaction, and you proceeded anyway because you thought you could logic your way through emotional consequences. Margaret closed her laptop. Mr. Morrison, for what it's worth, the promotion offer remains valid regardless of Miss Chen's immediate response. She'll need time to process. Give her space. James nodded mutely, still staring at the closed door. Give her space. Sound advice that felt impossible to follow. He wanted to chase after Elena, to explain more fully, to somehow make her understand that the deception had been necessary and the recognition of her value was real. But Diana's earlier warning echoed in his memory. Elena had shown kindness to Marcus Hayes freely, without expectation of reward or recognition. James had tested that kindness like it was currency requiring authentication. The betrayal was not just about the lie, but about the fundamental imbalance of power it represented. I need to talk to her. Jim, don't. Thomas moved to block the door. Let her process. If you chase her now, you'll only make it worse. She needs space to decide if she can trust you again. If she can trust me again, she never trusted me in the first place. She trusted Marcus Hayes, who doesn't exist. Then give her time to meet James Morrison, the real one, not the chairman testing employees, but the man who built this company on principles she actually shares. Thomas's expression softened. You're not wrong about her deserving promotion. You're wrong about thinking your methodology doesn't matter. Intent doesn't erase impact, Jim. The words settled like weights in James's chest. He had spent a week congratulating himself on clever investigation, on discovering both corruption and integrity through strategic deception. But he had never fully considered how that deception would feel from Elena's perspective, how the revelation would transform her memories of helping Marcus Hayes from acts of service into performances she had given for an audience of one. The chairman, watching, judging, measuring her worthiness for advancement. I'll give her today. Tomorrow, I'll try to explain properly. And if she won't listen, if she refuses the promotion— James looked at his oldest friend, the man who had been with him since Sterling Trust Bank was just a dream and a foolish promise. Then I'll have destroyed something good in pursuit of something right, and I'll have proven myself no better than the system I was trying to fix. He left the conference room and took the elevator down to the branch floor, emerging into the public space where customers conducted their banking surrounded by marble and light. Elena's station stood empty, her terminal dark. A handwritten sign propped on her keyboard announced she was on break. But James saw through the polite fiction. Elena had fled to somewhere she could process the explosion of her reality in private. The branch continued operating around him, other tellers serving customers, the machinery of banking grinding forward regardless of individual crisis. James stood in the lobby of his own creation and felt the weight of his mother's ghost pressing against his chest. He had built this bank to honor Rose Morrison's memory, to create an institution that would treat people like her with dignity. And in pursuit of that mission, he had tested Elena Chen's humanity like it required verification. The bitter irony cut deep. In trying to ensure his bank lived up to its principles, James had violated the very dignity he claimed to protect. He had made Elena perform her integrity for his evaluation, had transformed her authentic kindness into evidence collected for his investigation. And now he stood in the aftermath, wondering if the corruption he had excised from his company had been replaced with something worse. The corruption of using good people as instruments for his own purposes, regardless of their consent or awareness. James left the branch and drove back to his office through late morning traffic, his mind churning through approaches and arguments, ways he might repair what he had broken. But all his executive decisiveness felt useless in the face of Elena's betrayal. Business problems had business solutions. Human problems required something else entirely, something James Morrison had spent 40 years avoiding by reducing all interactions to transactions. Diana was waiting in his office with coffee and the expression of someone who had predicted disaster and taken no joy in being correct. She ran. "Wouldn't you?" James collapsed into his chair, accepting the coffee without tasting it. "I just promoted someone who thinks I tested her humanity like it was a job interview, who believes every kind gesture she made was evaluated for my benefit." "That's because you did exactly that." Diana sat across from him, her voice carrying no judgment, just observation. "Jim, you spent a week treating Elena Chen like a case study. You documented her interactions, analyzed her responses, measured her worthiness for advancement. That's not how you build trust. That's how you break it. I needed evidence. I needed to see. You needed to see if she would be kind to poor people when the chairman was watching. You needed to verify her integrity met your standards. But integrity isn't something that requires external validation. It exists independent of observation. And by testing it, you suggested you didn't trust her to possess it without your scrutiny." James set down his untasted coffee. "How do I fix this? I don't know if you can, not immediately. Elena needs to decide if she can forgive the methodology because she agrees with the outcome. And that's not a decision you can force or negotiate. So I wait. You wait, and while you're waiting, you consider whether your interest in Elena Chen is really professional or if you've been lying to yourself about that too." The question landed with precision, cutting through all James's careful justifications. He had told himself the investigation was about company integrity, that his focus on Elena was about identifying talent for promotion, that the week of observation was purely strategic. But Diana knew him too well, had seen the way he studied footage of Elena's interactions, had heard the tone in his voice when he discussed her competence, had recognized infatuation disguised as professional interest. "I barely know her." "You've spent a week studying her like she's the only person in your company." That's not investigation, Jim. That's obsession. And now you have to figure out if what you feel for Elena Chen is real, or if you're just infatuated with the idea of someone who showed you kindness when you pretended to need it. James wanted to argue to defend his actions as purely professional, but alone in his office with Diana's uncomfortable truths hanging in the air, he admitted what he had been avoiding. Somewhere between Monday's first visit and Friday's last, James Morrison had developed feelings for Elena Chen, had begun to imagine conversations beyond banking transactions, had wondered what it might be like to know her as himself rather than as Marcus Hayes. But those feelings were built on a foundation of deception. Elena did not know James Morrison. She knew Marcus Hayes, the struggling father who needed help. And now she knew that Marcus Hayes was a fiction designed to test her, which meant everything she felt about that interaction was tainted by betrayal. "What do I do, Diana? You give her space. You let her decide if the promotion is something she wants despite how it was offered. And you accept that she may never trust you personally, regardless of whether she accepts the position professionally. Diana stood, gathering her tablet. And Jim? Consider that maybe the real test wasn't about whether Elena had integrity. Maybe it was about whether you did, whether you could see value in people without needing to verify it through manipulation. She left him alone with that uncomfortable observation. James turned his chair toward the windows, watching Portland spread beneath him in concrete and glass and steel. Somewhere in that vast network of streets and buildings, Elena Chen was processing the revelation that her kindness had been evaluated like a performance, that the man she had helped was a chairman testing her worthiness. James had spent 40 years building an empire on principles, had created Sterling Trust Bank to honor his mother's memory and prove that banking could serve everyone with dignity. But in pursuit of that mission, he had forgotten the most fundamental truth. People were not instruments to be tested. They were ends in themselves, worthy of respect regardless of whether they passed examinations designed by those with power. He had failed his own test, had proven himself willing to sacrifice individual dignity in service of institutional integrity. And now he had to live with the consequences of that failure while hoping Elena Chen might somehow find forgiveness he did not deserve. The afternoon passed in administrative necessities. James met with the board to explain Victoria's and Richard's terminations, fielded questions about interim branch management, reviewed candidates for Richard Chen's replacement as CFO. The machinery of corporate governance grinding forward regardless of personal crisis. But through every meeting, every conversation, every decision, James's mind returned to Elena's expression in that conference room, the shock transmuting to betrayal, the recognition that her kindness had been evaluated like job performance, the anger at having her integrity treated as something requiring external validation. Evening found James in his penthouse, whiskey in hand, Elena's business card on the coffee table before him. He picked up his phone 3 times to call her, 3 times set it down without dialing. What could he say that would not sound like excuse or justification? How could he explain that his methodology had been wrong while insisting his recognition of her value was right? Tuesday morning, James went to the branch early, arriving before employees or customers. He stood in the empty lobby watching sunrise light paint marble and steel in shades of gold and gray. Elena's station waited dark and silent. Thomas had informed him she had called in sick, taking personal time to deal with an unspecified family emergency. The polite fiction everyone understood meant she could not face returning to work while processing revelation. Wednesday brought the same absence. Thursday as well. By Friday, James was convinced Elena would resign rather than accept promotion from a chairman who had tested her humanity like it was something requiring verification. He drafted a letter apologizing for his methodology while defending his conclusions, tore it up, drafted another, tore that up too. Words felt inadequate to address the fundamental betrayal of treating a person as experimental subject. Friday afternoon, Diana entered his office without knocking, her expression carefully neutral in the way that signaled important news. Elena Chen is downstairs. She's asking to see you. James felt his heart lurch against his ribs. Did she say why? Only that she's made a decision about the promotion offer. Jim, don't push. Let her speak. Whatever she's decided, respect it. He nodded, straightening his tie, armor donned for a confrontation that felt more terrifying than any board meeting or hostile takeover. Diana led him to a small conference room on the main floor, the kind used for customer consultations and loan discussions. Neutral territory. Elena sat at the table wearing jeans and a sweater rather than her bank uniform, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. When James entered, she stood with automatic politeness before catching herself and sitting again deliberately. Mr. Morrison, thank you for seeing me. Of course, I've been hoping we could talk. James took a seat across from her, maintaining distance, careful not to crowd. How are you? Confused, angry, trying to figure out if I should accept your offer or resign on principle. Elena met his gaze directly, no deference or fear in her expression, only exhaustion and something harder. I've spent 5 days trying to understand why you thought testing me was acceptable, why you believed my humanity required verification before you could trust me with authority. It wasn't about trust. Then what was it about? Because from where I'm sitting, You came into my workplace wearing poverty like a costume so you could see if I would treat you badly. And when I didn't, when I showed you kindness because that's who I am, you decided I passed some secret examination. That's not recognition, Mr. Morrison. That's audition. The accusation landed clean and true. James felt it impact his carefully constructed justifications, felt them crack under the weight of Elena's anger. She was right. He had auditioned her, had made her perform her values for his evaluation while never revealing he was audience rather than participant. You're right. I treated you like an experimental subject instead of a person. I told myself it was necessary for investigation, but that was excuse. I could have reviewed customer complaints, conducted official interviews, used any number of legitimate methods. Instead, I chose manipulation because I wanted to see the truth unfiltered. I wanted to know who you really were when you thought no one important was watching. And what did you learn, Mr. Morrison? What did your week of playing poor teach you? James held her gaze, refusing to look away from the anger he had earned. I learned that you're exactly who Sterling Trust Bank needs leading branches. That you understand service and dignity in ways most people never bother to learn. That you make customers smarter about their own finances instead of exploiting their ignorance for profit. I learned you're principled and competent and deserving of advancement. And you learned all that by lying to me. Yes, Elena absorbed his acknowledgement without visible reaction. Here's what I learned, Mr. Morrison. I learned that the chairman of my company doesn't trust his employees to be decent without external surveillance. I learned that kindness is currency that gets evaluated for worthiness. And I learned that no matter how many times your company says it values integrity, what it really values is performance that passes tests. The words cut deep because they were accurate. James had spent 40 years claiming Sterling Trust Bank operated on different principles than other institutions. But his methodology had proven those principles were just window dressing. When push came to shove, he operated exactly like the banks he claimed to oppose, with suspicion, surveillance, and the assumption that trust required verification. You're right about all of that, and I can't undo the methodology. I can only acknowledge it was wrong and commit to doing better going forward. Doing better how? By not disguising yourself as poor people anymore? That's a remarkably low bar, Mr. Morrison. By promoting people based on documented performance rather than covert testing. By trusting that employees hired with care and trained properly will act with integrity without needing surveillance. By remembering that the people who work for this bank are human beings, not instruments for institutional purposes. James paused, forcing himself to continue. And by acknowledging that I was wrong about you specifically, not wrong about your competence or integrity, wrong to test them at all. Elena looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I've been offered similar positions at 2 other banks in the past 3 years. Both times I turned them down because I believed Sterling Trust Bank's mission was real. That banking for everyone meant something more than marketing copy. Your test didn't just betray me personally, Mr. Morrison. It betrayed that mission. You proved the company I believed in was as hollow as any other. The observation landed like a gut punch, forcing James to confront the full scope of damage his investigation had caused. He had not just hurt Elena. He had destroyed her faith in the institution she had served with integrity for 5 years, had proven that Sterling Trust Bank's values were negotiable when the chairman found them inconvenient. I can't defend what I did. I can only try to make it right going forward. The promotion is still available if you want it. Full authority to restructure customer service according to principles you think matter. Support from executive leadership to implement changes. Salary and benefits commensurate with the responsibility. And if I accept, everyone will know I got promoted because the chairman tested me personally. They'll assume I slept my way up, or that I'm your favorite, or that the position isn't real merit but charity. My authority will be compromised before I even start. James had not considered that angle, too focused on Elena's personal betrayal to think through how others would interpret the promotion. But she was right. The circumstances of her advancement would follow her, would undermine her authority, would make every decision she made subject to speculation about whether she had earned her position or been gifted it. Then we announce it differently. We say you've been identified through standard performance review as ready for advancement. We don't mention my investigation. You want me to help you cover up the methodology? I want to protect your professional reputation from damage my choices caused. Elena stood, pacing to the window, her back to James. My father is 70 years old with Parkinson's disease. I'm his only caregiver. The salary increase from this promotion would let me hire professional help, would give him better quality of life in his remaining years. I need this position, Mr. Morrison. I need the money and the authority and the opportunity to do work that matters. Then take it. But I don't want to take it from you. I don't want my advancement to be tainted by your manipulation. I don't want to spend the rest of my career wondering if I earned anything or if I'm just the teller who passed the chairman's secret test. Elena turned back to face him, her expression carrying pain that transcended professional grievance. You made me doubt myself, Mr. Morrison. Made me question whether my kindness to Marcus Hayes was authentic or performance. Whether I would have treated him the same way if I'd known you were watching. That's the real damage. Not the deception itself, but what it did to my confidence in my own integrity. James felt the words pierce something deep in his chest, understanding finally catching up to impact. He had thought the betrayal was about the lie, but the real injury was existential. Elena now questioned her own motivations, wondered if her values were genuine or constructed for external validation. James had not just tested her integrity, he had poisoned her relationship with it. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, meaningless against the scope of harm. I can't undo what I did. I can only tell you that everything I observed was real. Your kindness to Marcus Hayes came from who you are, not from any awareness of surveillance. You treated me with dignity because that's your nature, not because anyone was watching. The test was mine, Elena. The failure was mine. Don't let my methodology make you doubt what I saw clearly. You're exactly who you appear to be, and that person is extraordinary. Elena studied him with eyes that saw past the chairman to something else. Do you know why I helped Marcus Hayes? Why I went out of my way to explain policies and offer advice and treat him like he mattered? Because you're a good person. Because my father was Marcus Hayes once, came to this country with broken English and $50, worked 3 jobs to give me opportunities he never had. And when he tried to open his first bank account, a teller laughed at him, told him maybe he should learn English before trying to manage money. My father came home and cried, and I was 7 years old watching him break. Elena's voice wavered but held steady. I became a banker so I could be the person my father needed that day, so no one else would feel the way he felt. Your mother taught you that same lesson, Mr. Morrison, which means you should have understood, without testing me, why I treated Marcus Hayes with dignity. The parallel landed with devastating clarity. James and Elena had both been shaped by witnessing humiliation of people they loved, had both built careers around ensuring that humiliation never repeated. They shared the same foundational experience, the same driving mission, which made James's choice to test Elena's integrity even more unforgivable. He had tested someone who understood his pain because she carried the same wound. I should have trusted you, should have recognized a kindred spirit instead of treating you like you needed to prove yourself. James stood, moving to the window beside Elena, but maintaining careful distance. I can't change what I did, can only commit to being better, to trusting people who share our values instead of requiring they prove them through trials. And if I accept the promotion, what happens when I make decisions you disagree with? Will you trust me then, or will you second-guess everything because you never really knew me, only Marcus Hayes' interaction with a teller? I'll trust you. And if I fail to trust you, call me on it. Remind me that trust isn't something I get to withhold and grant based on performance. It's something I owe people who share this mission. Elena turned to face him fully, her expression still guarded but something softening in her eyes. I need 48 hours. I need to talk to my father. Think about whether I can accept this position despite how it was offered. And Mr. Morrison? If I do accept, it's not because I forgive your methodology. It's because the work matters more than my pride. Don't mistake necessity for absolution. I wouldn't dream of it. Elena walked toward the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. One more thing. If I take this position, you and I need to figure out how to work together professionally despite what you did. That means boundaries, clear expectations, No more surveillance or testing. I'm not Marcus Hayes, and you're not the chairman playing dress-up. We're two people trying to honor promises we made because of pain we witnessed. Can you do that? James met her gaze and found himself answering with more honesty than he had intended. I'll try. But Elena, I need you to know something. When I was Marcus Hayes, the kindness you showed me mattered. Not professionally, personally. You treated me like I was human when you thought I was nobody. That recognition touched something I'd forgotten existed. So while the investigation methodology was wrong, the person I met through it was real. And I'd like to know that person better, if you'll allow it, not as chairman and employee, as people who understand each other's foundations. Elena's expression flickered through surprise, wariness, and something else James could not name. Are you asking to be friends, Mr. Morrison? Or is this another test disguised as personal interest? I'm saying I saw something rare in you, and I'd like to explore whether that recognition can exist outside the professional context. But only if you're willing, only if my deception hasn't permanently destroyed the possibility of trust between us. She considered him with the same careful attention she had given Marcus Hayes's financial problems, weighing risks and possibilities. 48 hours, Mr. Morrison. I'll give you an answer about the promotion. Whether there can be anything else between us beyond professional necessity, that's going to take longer to determine. Trust isn't rebuilt in a week. I understand. Elena left the conference room, and James stood alone watching Portland's Friday afternoon traffic crawl past the windows. 48 hours, 2 days to wait, while Elena decided if the work mattered more than the wound. 2 days to consider whether James Morrison had destroyed something precious in pursuit of something right, or whether redemption might still be possible through honesty and commitment to change. He returned to his office and found Diana waiting with the expression of someone ready to hear confession. James collapsed into his chair and told her everything. Elena's anger, her pain, her question about whether the promotion could exist independent of the testing that discovered it. Diana listened without interruption, and when he finished, she asked the question that mattered. Do you love her? James felt the question land in his chest and could not answer immediately. Did he love Elena Chen? Or was he infatuated with the idea of someone who had shown him kindness when he pretended to need it? Did he want Elena herself, or did he want the feeling of being seen as human rather than chairman? I don't know yet, but I want the chance to find out. And I don't know if she'll give me that chance after what I did. Then you wait, and while you're waiting, you consider whether the love you think you feel is worth pursuing, given the power imbalance between you. Chairman and branch manager, employer and employee. Those dynamics complicate everything, Jim. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're already imagining a future where Elena forgives you and you build something together. But you need to consider the possibility that the kindest thing you can do for her is maintain professional distance. Let her succeed on her own merit without the complication of the chairman's romantic interest compromising her authority. Diana was right, and James hated her for it. The most ethical choice might be to promote Elena and then stay away. Let her build her career without the shadow of his attention. But the thought of watching her from distance, of never knowing if the connection forged through Marcus Hayes could have become something real, felt like dying by inches. 48 hours, he repeated. Then I'll know if she even accepts the promotion. Everything else comes after. Diana left him alone with his thoughts and the Portland skyline. James sat in the gathering darkness and tried to imagine a future where Elena Chen forgave his methodology enough to work with him, where trust could be rebuilt through time and consistent behavior, where the recognition between them could grow into something more than chairman and employee. But imagination felt hollow without knowing if Elena would even give him that chance. Monday morning would bring answers. Monday, Elena would deliver her decision about the promotion, and James would learn if redemption was possible or if he had permanently destroyed something valuable in pursuit of institutional integrity. Until then, all he could do was wait and hope that the woman who had shown kindness to Marcus Hayes might find forgiveness for James Morrison, despite all his failures to deserve it.